Yeah, we got a lot. I got a lot I want to cover. Georgia said didn't know if we'd have a lot of speakers here or not, so I might need to stretch this out. So I prepared some stuff, and then so let's see if we can get to it. Last time I was here, I set before you the constitutional alternative to securing our border, and I approached it from the standpoint: what does the U.S. Constitution authorize as to what should be done regarding the border? Didn't say whether or not it would necessarily work or be done or not, but what does the Constitution authorize? And I basically made these points. One, we are a sovereign state. Sovereignty does not mean anything unless you have secure borders, and we don't have secure borders. Secondly, that it is the responsibility, according to the Constitution, U.S. Constitution, for the general government. I don't call it federal anymore because we don't operate under the principle of federalism anymore. The general government is responsible to secure our sovereignty as a state of Texas and to protect us and to protect the state, protect its territory. Third, that the way in which it should be done is that the Constitution says that they are to call up, that is Congress, the state militias to repel invasions. And indeed, this is not an immigration issue. This is an invasion issue. You're seeing that word used more and more and more by people. And as a matter of fact, Missy just showed me on her Facebook post it was that Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst has announced that they are going to shut down the border from the invaders. And let's hope that's true. Because the militias are composed of the people. I gave you the definitions from our founders of what the militia are. And then the federal government's responsibility is to call them up, to provide for them, and I gave the reasons why we want them to do that. One, it would give the militias the authority of the United States government. Two, it would also give these people who came up and volunteered to do that provisions, meaning compensation while they're away from the job. And third, they would fall under the protection of USERRA, which would guarantee their job and their employer when they go back to work. And that if the federal government, if the general government does not do that, then the U.S. Constitution and the Texas Constitution authorizes the governor of Texas to call up the state militia and the state guard. If you go to Dwayne Stovall's website, put in TexasFirst.com, he has a real pretty colorful flow chart that details the exact same thing that I outlined to you last time. As a matter of fact, also, if you go to YouTube and Google Louis Gohmert, represented the 1st Congressional District of Texas out of Tyler, yeah. I found out after I wrote my paper that on July 11th, he got on the House floor and he made the same argument out of the Constitution that I made. So I thought, I feel like I'm pretty good company. Louis Gohmert, Dwayne Stovall, all right, I got it right. But I wanted to go back and touch on something else. When Georgia had first asked me to speak a few weeks ago, I was supposed to talk to you about the danger that we're experiencing in the destruction of the Fourth Amendment, our rights and our freedoms to be secure from unreasonable search and seizures. And I want to share with you some principles and things that came from the 16th or the 17th century British philosopher named John Locke, who wrote a treatise called The Second Treatise of Government. How many people have read this? Oh, good for you. If you haven't read it, it's not you can see it's not a big book, but it's a good book. Because when you read this, it's almost like you're reading Thomas Jefferson. John Locke had a tremendous influence on our founders. And I wanted to share with you his approach to what was the true basis of individual freedom and liberty. And we'll bring it forward and see how it's in play today, especially on our border. Because there's one thing I didn't touch on last time, and you'll see I'm going to tie this all nice and neatly together, I hope, in a little package at the end. And Locke said that individuals have the right to private property because that is the basis of individual freedom. And here's what he says about that. He says, all men, yet every man has a property in his own person. This nobody has any right to but himself. The labor of his body and the work of his hands, we may properly say, are his. Whatsoever then he removes out of the state that nature has provided and left it in, he has mixed his labor with and joined to it something that is his own, and thereby makes it his property. In other words, you take something and you invent it, you build it, you take land, you farm it, you create something valuable out of it. That is yours because you took something that was common to everybody out in the world and you
melded your labor with it to make it something. So contrary to what Barack Obama says, you did build it if you have your own business. And that is your property, and when the EPA or the IRS or any one of those stupid little letters comes along and takes it from you, they are in violation of the very principle of individual personal liberty and freedom. That's what John Locke said anyway. Okay. Now I know he's an old fuddy-duddy Englishman, right? The principles don't change over time because they are principles. If they change, they are principles to begin with. All right, moving right along. Why do men form societies? Why do we form governments? Well, it's because we have what he called the state of nature. Each one of us has the right to defend ourselves. Each one of us has the right to take our property and so forth. But if everybody has that right to themselves, every man is a law unto himself. And that doesn't work because that results in anarchy. Survival of the fittest, the strongest. And so we form societies, we form governments. And we give up some of this natural and alienable right to the society, to the government, to protect those rights. Tell you what, I'm not going to read all these, I'll just make the points, because time's short. We form government, we say, all right, society, government, I am going to give up my natural right of self-preservation, self-protection, shooting people to come on my property, so that we can have a police force to protect that for me. Otherwise, I've got people shooting there and all that kind of stuff. That's basically the thought. But what happens when governments don't fulfill their obligation? Right. Then that right reverts back to me. And so we form societies, we form governments for the sake of some commonality, consistency, and cooperation with each other, where we don't have each other at each other's throats, and whoever is the strongest wins. But he says, men do not intend that governments they form act arbitrarily. And there is a danger in consolidated government, he says, because continuous governments that meet all the time, will end up taking whatever it wants, the laws against it notwithstanding. How often, how long does Congress meet compared to what it did when it was first started, our country was first founded? All year long, except for when they take off the month of August, right? And what happens when they're there? We got to prove that we're earning our keep. So what do we got to do? We got to pass more laws. Just like what do the bureaucrats got to do in the bureaus? We got to prove that we're earning our keep. So we got to pass more regulations. And so we get thousands and thousands of regulations every year. We get laws and more laws every year that a lot of them probably not necessary. Most of them probably not necessary. And that's what happens. We lose our liberty, we lose our freedom, we lose our property. And he said that when power is exercised outside the law, it has no right to be obeyed. This one I do want to read, because boy, y'all are going to love this one. As I read this, I want you to think about a certain president. Guess who? Whoever gets into the exercise of any part of the power by other ways than what the laws of the community have prescribed, that would be the Constitution, has no right to be obeyed, though the form of the Commonwealth be still preserved, since he is not the person the laws have appointed, and consequently not the person the people have consented to. No, that's Barack Obama. Would that we had Thomas Jefferson president today. We wouldn't have the mess that we have. He says, nor can such a usurper or any deriving from him ever have a title till the people are both at liberty to consent and have actually consented to allow and confirm in him the power he hath till then usurped. Have we considered all the stuff that Barack Obama is doing? No. And so therefore, are we obligated to obey what he's doing outside the power? Not in the least. And listen, there's another one really good. Let me read that one to you. Then we'll get on to some other comments. He said this. When any one or more, be like Congress, shall take upon them to make laws whom the people have not appointed to do so, they make laws without authority. which the people are not therefore bound to obey. Does President Obama have legislative authority according to the Constitution? No. Absolutely not. Is he making laws by his executive orders? Yes, he is. Are we therefore obligated to obey them according to John Locke and the philosophy he put forth? Absolutely not. And so we need to just quit saying, well, there's nothing we can do. That's the law. No. We need to rise up, as they talk about, becoming active and saying, no more. It stops now and it stops here. So, he goes on to say, when one is in power and he violates a constitution, it is the greatest of crimes, because you have violated the compact you have made with the people, that which the people entered into in order that they might have their property protected. And when those in power, he says, miscarry it, they forfeit that right, and the power reverts back to the people. I can read you what he said, but let me quote you something else. We hold these truths, that all men are created equal, are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life and every pursuit of happiness. And that when any form of government destroys these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to establish a new government. You know where Jefferson got that? He got that right out of John Locke, and according to this book, it's on page 101, 112, the very last paragraph of the second treatise on government. And so the government is instituted to protect our property. Now, last time I said, why does the state of Texas have the authority to take control of the border themselves? I thought the United States had government was supposed to take care of the border because it's the border of the United States. But that border also has laying right on top of it what? The state border of Texas. It may be the border of the United States, but it's also our border. And if the United States didn't go protect theirs, and by George, we're going to protect ours.
And it's part of the problem.
But there's one more border, and I did not touch on this last time. What do you think is the third border that lies right on top of the federal border, the state border? What's that third border? Anybody want to take a guess? Property of whom? The individual ranchers, the people down there. Their border is also right on that same one on top of the other. And so what does Locke say is the purpose of government? To protect my personal, individual property. And therefore, if the general government is not going to protect the property of those ranchers and those people who live down there in the border, then whose responsibility is it?
Right.
The state. And if the state doesn't do it, then those people, again, the law of nature, like I said, it reverts back to them. They have the right to protect their own border. And that's ultimately what we go to. And we don't want that, because then we're going to have absolute chaos and bloodshed on the border, and we don't want that. So it is imperative that we know the general government's not going to, but that the state step in and do it. Now, what has happened since the last time we were together? Well, no. I know, calm down, not a whole lot. They passed their bill in the House before they broke their session, going nowhere because the Senate had gone, and Obama would have vetoed it anyway. Well, Brooke, Georgia, got a hold of me and said, we need to get together and try to come up with a plan of action. And so we got a hold of Bill, and we got a hold of Tony Tinderholt, and I brought my, I should say former campaign website manager with me, who's also very politically attuned. And we met at Tony's house one Saturday for a few hours. And here's what we want to do. You know, as I just found out, we found out Louis Gohmert was on the floor of the House of Representatives arguing the same thing that I had argued. And now we find out that Dwayne Stovall's been arguing. We thought, we've got a champion in the House of Representatives. So I was assigned the task, okay, Frank, you wrote this paper, made the presentation. You write a letter from the standpoint of it coming from the legislators of the state of Texas, And Bill was going to see if he could get some of the others that he has influence with and sign on to this letter and present it to Louis Gohmert and have a big publicity event with it. And you will find maybe a letter that's circulated around. You should have had it, but it doesn't say to Congressman Gohmert. I took that letter and I rephrased parts of it so that it could be used by you. Because it's written, instead of we, the members of the Texas State Legislature, do this each Congress, do blah, blah, blah. It's written the standpoint of I am writing to request. That you can take this, massage it however you want to, but you can use this as a template or as a guide, and send that to your state representatives, to your congressional representatives, to your state senators. We want to get this proposal of what the responsibility of the government is out there. And we know good and well Congress is going to do what?
Nothing.
Nothing. They're not going to do what I outlined to you as their constitutional responsibility last time. But that's okay, because that's nothing in game. Once we get this message out there, hopefully it gains some traction, and that perhaps Congressman Gohmert and some others will make this an issue on the floor of the House. Congress turns it down. What does that give Representative Ziegler and the others? It gives them a lever. Okay, congressionally, they did nothing. Constitutionally, who's first in line to fulfill the protection of our border, our property? The general government. If they don't, then what? The state. And that gives these men and women who want to fight for us a lever to put more pressure on Governor Perry. Okay, big boy, it's time for you to step into the batter's box and knock this thing out of the park. You call up the state militias. You call up the Texas Guard. You put them on the border. This is not a matter of immigration. So all immigration laws are off the table. This is an invasion, and because you are the governor and the general government has not done their job, you can arrest, or maybe that's not the word to say, but you can stop these people at the border, detain them, ascertain where they came from, give them medical aid if necessary, and you can then send them back. We'll do it as Texans, and the federal government can go take a flying leap. That's what we're trying to do. So, that is what you'll see in that letter that you should have. It has the honorable, it has a blank. Fill in your representative's name, the senator's name, or whatever. Change the wording however you need to change it. You can use the letter as it is. You can change it to fit your particular style of writing or whatever. But this is something that you can use to get to our elected representatives, to get this issue out, bring the pressure on them, and give some grassroots support momentum to Bill so he can get with some of the others. And I know there's some that are going to be willing to go along with this, I believe, that we can at least get this pushed. Because if we don't push, we get pushed. And I'm tired of being pushed. Pardon me? He has sent the he's called up the National Guard, he sent 1,000 guardsmen down there, but I'm not sure they're going to have that much authority because still immigration laws are coming into play. They're still treating this like an immigration issue, not an invasion. Also, Tony brought this to the knowledge of the group of us that met. There's what's called in the code, Title 10 and a Title 32. Title 32 authorizes the state governor to call the National Guard up, and when they do, they are under his authority, his command. However, a Title 10 calling up of the National Guard is when the President, as Commander-in-Chief, has authority over them. And at any point in time, Tony explained, the President can step in and say, okay, I know you called them up under your authority, but I'm going to make this a Title 10 calling up, and now they're under my authority, my control, and I can tell them what they can and can't do.
Not for the Texas Guard.
Not if they're the Texas Guard. I'm talking National Guard. National Guard. But if Governor Perry would call up the Texas Guard, which Tony said is about 2,500 men and women, not enough of what we need, but about 3,500. He calls them up, guess what? They're never a Title 10 caller. They are to begin with, and they will always be under the command of the governor of the state of Texas. And the militias militias. Unless Congress calls them up, they can't be a Title 10 either. They can be if Congress calls them up, because what does it say? When the militia are called up by Congress, Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution says the President shall be the commander, or Article 2, Section 1, the commander, the commander-in-chief shall be in command of the Army, naval forces, and the militias of the various states when called up to the service of the United States.
Do we have a militia and a Texas Guard?
Yes, sir, we do. Tony explained we have about 6 different militia groups, maybe some more, but he said 3 of them are really good. They're large. And one of them, he talked about how they're comprised primarily of former law officers or current law officers, former military, and that this particular group he was talking about trains one day every month. And so what did we learn last time about what our founders defined the militia to be? Men capable of bearing arms and trained in the use of arms. Okay. Former law enforcement officers, current law enforcement officers, former military, they train once a month. They're organized. Bingo! They meet our founders' definition and the Constitution of what the militias are. So yes, sir, we do have them. They can be called up, and they would be under Governor Perry's direction. And that's why we have got to get this word out. Let's start with the constitutional approach, which is what we are. We are supposed to be a constitutional republic. I don't believe we are anymore, but that's what we aspire to get back to. So let's take that constitutional approach. Let's get this out there and push to have Congress call forth the militias. They're not going to do it. That then gives us the right to fall back on Plan B, which is for the governor to call them up. And by doing this approach, we give Representative Zedler and the others the momentum and the force behind them to bring the pressure to bear on Governor Perry to do what he is constitutionally obligated and authorized to do. And so that is what you'll find under the table. And also, I think Wayne talked about this other form that Georgia and Brooke put together about contacting people. You know, there's 2 copies of it. Fill one out, leave with them tonight, take one home with you, and make copy, you know, so that you can do your calling and writing and so forth. Those are the 2 papers you should have. Okay, I got time for questions?
Sure, if you want to take a couple. Go ahead.
Okay, that's the shorter abbreviation of what I was going to do. Yes, sir.
Can we make the federal government provision the state militia under the Dick law?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that.
The Dick law says that the United States government shall provision and provide arms to the state militia.
The Constitution also says that. The Constitution says that Congress is to make provision for the Army, provision, organizing, disciplining, and training of the militias. Now, if they don't do it, again, it reverts back to the authority of the states. Ultimately, it comes back to the states because we are a union. When I say the Pledge of Allegiance, I don't say one nation under God. I say one union under God. We are a union of 50 sovereign states that are supposed to be a check against the encroachment of federal power. Guaranteed a Republican form of government. Not necessarily a republic, but we have a Republican form of government. So I guess you could call us a republic. But if Congress doesn't provide for them, then the states will and must. Because ultimately, it is our militia. When the militia was first formed, they were men capable of training arms. They were to use the arms that were common use at that day and time, and they provided their own. Remember this? We talked about Minutemen? Why were they called Minutemen? Because they had their muskets right there by the door with their own powder horn, ready to go when called upon. Yes, ma'am?
That's before their Second Amendment rights were taken away.
Yes. Yeah. Before our Second Amendment. Yes, sir.
Get all this done and get it back to Perry about how long will it take?
That would be a Tony Tinderholt question because he's the military guy in our group. And unfortunately, he's out of town now. I think maybe in an emergency, it should be able to come up should be able to be done pretty quick. If we had a hurricane hit Houston or the Gulf Coast, I imagine we could probably get them called up pretty quick within a week or so. So that I really don't know because it's my Bill, would you have an idea about how long that might take?
I'm sorry, I don't know. Yes, sir.
I've never heard of militias in where are they really do exist.
Yeah.
We have a Texas Guard, we have a National Guard in Texas, we have 3 different organizations.
We have more than 3. They are citizen organizations, citizens who have banded together, who are training that very purpose. They have different names. Again, I wish Tony could be here because he needs more information about that because he knows and is acquainted with some of the leaders of these groups. Yes, sir.
I just want to say that I guess being afraid is the best thing that you get something done. If we listen to them, not use deadly force, stop people from trying water, they're going to keep coming. It's like when I was in high school in the 60s. I knew they were going to beat my butt with that paddle. I got a miserable little kid problem. If you're afraid, you're not going to stop anybody.
I wish that some of those drug cartel guys would fire on one of those river boats we got just once. And I know they have. But what I wish is that those guys in those boats would have the green light to open up them 30 cows they got on there and just rip them to pieces. That might put an end to it real quick.
If we're going to classify this as an invasion, then our Texas militia should have the right
Yes, ma'am, they
to
do.
firearms,
Yes, ma'am, they would.
to have the DC in.
That's what I'm saying. That is the whole thrust of what we're trying to do. The Congress is not going to do squat. They're not going to do a thing. And so, in trying to take a constitutional approach, so that we're not just, ask Congress to do their duty. And when they refuse to do it, then constitutionally, Texas can. And the feds can't come along and say, Texas, what do you guys think you're doing down here? You can't do that. We said, oh yes, we can. We asked you to do it. You said no. So then, by George, the Constitution says we can, we will, and we must, and we're going to do it.